How you doing, everybody? It's Shinobi, technical editor at Bitcoin Magazine, joined by Tom Honzik, the technical director at the Unchained Concierge service. How you doing today, Tom?
Doing great, Shinobi. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming. Hope you had a fun Halving celebration yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty cool to watch the block get mined in real time. I was at Pleb Lab here in Austin, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, things got pretty hectic. I'm still kind of rolling over in my mind what was going on with how fast those blocks were coming in. I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of operations kind of just brought on a lot of idle hash rates to try and speed things along and maybe get that second block built as fast as possible to disincentivize any reorg shenanigans.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. It seemed like the expected time of the halving block kept moving up and stuff, and yeah, we got a couple of blocks right in a row as well.
Yeah, we kind of went a little gimmicky at the BM live stream, and we were timing the segments for different things based on the block intervals. I was supposed to be kind of the lead speaker for the inscription section, and literally 5 seconds after I sit down on the couch to start talking, the next block came in.
Yeah, you never know.
Bitcoiners, it's time to upgrade the security of your stack. Bitcoin Magazine has partnered with Unchained, the leader in collaborative custody services, to help you secure your Bitcoin with confidence. Unchained's collaborative custody services give you complete ownership over your Bitcoin while delegating one key to Unchained to protect you from theft and loss due to simple mistakes. Using Bitcoin native multisig, Unchained's client services can help you increase the security of your Bitcoin and gain access to the next generation of financial services. Whether you want to bypass exchanges and stack sats directly into cold storage with Unchained Vault or hold physical Bitcoin in your tax-advantaged IRA, Unchained makes it simple and safe to use the best practices available to store your generational wealth.
So I guess let's get into what we're here to talk about today. You know, Unchained's entire business model kind of revolves around using multisig as a primitive to kind of offer a helping hand type service to users who might not have the easiest time managing a self-custodial setup by themselves. You know, there's really a lot of different ways that you can kind of establish or structure like sharded setups as far as key materials and how that works. You know, you have Shamir secret sharing, which isn't so much multisig, but still uses the basic idea of splitting secrets into multiple pieces where one of them isn't enough to actually do anything. You have conventional multisig that everyone's familiar with, and then some of the more advanced multi-party computation schemes, Schnorr signatures. You want to kind of give us some of your thoughts on all these different schemes, like just at a high level, before we go into them a little deeper one by one?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I think a good place to start, just for the benefit of any listeners, is what are you trying to achieve with these kinds of things? And really, what you're trying to do is protect your Bitcoin. And there's kind of two primary things that people are trying to protect their Bitcoin from. And one of them is theft, and the other is loss. And so people want their Bitcoin to be protected in a way that it's complicated enough where a thief is not going to have easy access, but not so complicated that somebody can lose a piece of the puzzle and kind of lose access to their own money that way. And so there's several different ways you could do that. There are some kind of makeshift ways that you could jerry-rig together using just kind of a single sig wallet and kind of making copies of seed phrases and passphrases and putting them around in different spots. But that can get a little awkward. Really, there are kind of three main standardized ways to create what I like to call threshold security. So when I say threshold security, I mean you've got several different components that exist and can be stored separately, and then you need a threshold of them, a subset of those pieces to be able to access the Bitcoin. And that's what really allows you to protect yourself from single points of failure in the realm of both loss and theft, because if more than one item is required in order to access the Bitcoin, then that's going to mean that any item could get stolen and the thief is not going to have what they need to access the Bitcoin. But also, if you have these multiple pieces, you don't want to have a structure where you need all of them to access your Bitcoin, because that means that if any one of them got lost, then you don't have access to your Bitcoin anymore. And so those three standardized ways of operating, multisig is one that most people have heard of. Shamir's secret sharing, a lot of people have heard about as well. And then multi-party computation, or MPC. Maybe some are less familiar with that one. But yeah, they all have their own trade-offs, and I'm happy to get into maybe each of them and how they compare.
Yeah, I guess to start, you want to talk a little bit about Shamir sharing. It's something that's been talked about in the space quite a lot, but there isn't really many wallets or devices out there with support for it, and also at this point it's a little scattered in terms of standardization from my understanding. The only attempt I'm aware of to really create a standard for it is Slip 39, I want to say, Trezor Labs standard for that.
Right, yeah, so that's where I think most end users are going to have maybe run across Shamir, is with the Trezor hardware wallet, because certain models, during the setup, it asks you if you want to set up using an advanced Shamir backup. And really what Shamir is you're building a standard single sig wallet, except that the key, once it's created, it can be split into pieces, and then a threshold of those pieces can later be brought back together to reassemble the key. So, for example, someone could split a key into 3 shares and then store them separately, and perhaps they set it up where any 2 shares could be brought back together to reassemble the key. And so that really accomplishes that elimination of single points of failure, at least during storage, when you're storing these different pieces separately. The issue with Shamir that makes some people uncomfortable, and reasonably so, is that there are certain points where there's going to be single points of failure still. And in particular, when you're first setting up, you're setting up the key, and before you split it into the different pieces, your key does exist all in one place at one time. And also, if you're ever bringing the key back together, then you're to sign a transaction, right? If you're trying to sign a transaction to get Bitcoin out of your wallet, you need to reassemble that key all in the same place at the same time. So compared to the other 2 ways of doing threshold security, I would say those are two disadvantages that stand out for Shamir.
Yeah, so it's something that provides redundancy against loss, but it doesn't really provide any added security when it comes to actually signing or interacting with your wallet.
Yes. The other options do allow you to pretty much set up and access the Bitcoin while the pieces remain separate. And so someone that's concerned about bringing their items together all in one place at one time, and then, having the risk of a $5 wrench attack, someone threatening them to use that one key to send the Bitcoin somewhere else, that's the main disadvantage.
All right, and I guess the next category of things here would just be multisig. There you have the kind of plain vanilla multisig setup and the multi-party computation variants. I guess before we start really talking about the complexity of MPC, Would you like to kind of give your thoughts on just a regular multisig setup and the positives and downsides involved with using something like that?
Yeah. So multisig, I kind of differentiate them by calling one like script multisig, and then the other would be MPC. So script multisig is what most people would be familiar with when they hear the word multisig and they hear a multisig wallet. And really what multisig is you've got a set of completely unique keys that can be stored separately. And then a threshold of those keys can sign a transaction and make that transaction valid. So, for example, you could have 3 separate keys, and any 2 of them could provide the signatures required to move the Bitcoin. Multisig, I think, or script multisig is really separated from Shamir and MPC in that it's kind of done on the blockchain level, right? It's the rules, the access policy. It's actually put into the redeem script for an address, and then it goes out there on the blockchain. It's kind of like a immutable contract that then sits on the blockchain in order to access the Bitcoin. And so there's some advantages and disadvantages to that. One is that if you want to adjust the access control policy, you pretty much need to do a transaction where you're moving your Bitcoin from one address to another. There's also the fact that activity on the blockchain can become public. It's a little less private than the other methods, because when you do take Bitcoin out of a multisig address, the specifics of the threshold quorum you're using is published for everybody to see. Also, the quorum for the multisig, it can cause more data for the transactions, meaning that it results in higher transaction fees as opposed to the other 2. So really, I would say multisig, it's a great, simple, strong option for accomplishing threshold security. But if someone wants to, have a wallet where they're transacting frequently and they want to save on fees, or they just want a simpler way to access their Bitcoin, an individual user might just choose a basic single sig wallet that would be less secure, but you do have those trade-offs.
So it's pretty much if you want the added security using a script multisig, you got to pay a little bit of a premium for that at the end of the day in terms of the on-chain fees.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. All right, then I guess to dive into the MPC side of things here, there's 2 different variants, well, at least in theory. The traditional ECDSA MPC setups that use the legacy wallets, addresses that start with 1. Apologies, I think there's a emergency if you can hear the siren in the background. But that is a little more cryptographically complex in terms of the protocol using it. And then you have the Schnorr setups, such as Musig, Frost, that are still kind of in development, although there are some basic Musig implementations at this point right now. Would you like to kind of break down the differences between these 2 and your thoughts on one versus the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So to begin, I'll just say, MPC is kind of, it shares something in common with the Shamir secret sharing, in that rather than being on the blockchain level, it's more on the key level. So it's similar in that what you're doing is you have these shares, and a threshold of the shares can then be used to get a signature for a transaction. The main difference between MPC and Shamir is that you actually don't ever need to reassemble a key to be in one place at one time and then sign the transaction with that key. What can happen is that the 2 out of 3 maybe shares for an MPC structure, they can just compute the signature without ever reassembling the key, which is pretty interesting. So there's some great advantages there, but as you point out, there are a few different ways to use MPC. So ECDSA, it has been kind of the normal signature algorithm for Bitcoin for a long time, and so there are protocols for MPC on top of that to aggregate these signatures. But then with the Taproot soft fork, we also had some new tooling with Schnorr signatures, and that has different MPC protocols, like you point out. So with the ECDSA, there's like quite a bit of different papers out there on like how to try to accomplish MPC. And I'm not a cryptographer, so I'm just taking people's word for it. But yeah, the criticism of those protocols is that they're very complicated from a cryptography standpoint, and that means that there's a lot less reassurance about them really being secure and not having any sort of vulnerabilities. In fact, there have been several substantial vulnerabilities that have gotten exposed in the last few years with certain MPC protocols for ECDSA. And so, yeah, a lot of people are not really using that, to my understanding. With Schnorr signatures, you are able to create some MPC algorithms or protocols that are a lot more simple, and people can have a lot more confidence in them. So yeah, Music 2 and Frost are kind of the leading ones there for Schnorr signatures. There's still some trade-offs, and I think just generally speaking, the Schnorr and the Frost stuff, it is pretty new still, and so I don't think it's really widely accessible or used just yet, but it does paint maybe a bright future for MPC getting wider use.
Yeah, but the potential, at least in the design level with the cryptography, is just it's a lot more mathematically simple. So even though they're kind of still in development, especially Frost with the threshold rather than requiring 100% of the keys, you know, when that's all fleshed out and properly tested, there should be a lot less room for vulnerabilities or exploits compared to the ECDSA protocols.
Right, yeah, that's my understanding here.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think, you know, one of the benefits when we really get to the point of having those Schnorr protocols deployed is getting the security benefits of something like a script-based multisig, but without the additional cost of having the extra signatures and the larger scripts, just in the process of only collaboratively generating that single signature in the protocol.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people, I think, are excited about. I would say that there are still some trade-offs to kind of script multisig versus the newer Frost stuff with Schnorr, but definitely the Schnorr, you know, Frost and Music does seem to be more competitive when people are considering these different threshold options than the ECDSA MPC was.
And I guess now that we kind of, I guess, have gone through at a high level like the different mechanisms here themselves, you know, the different types of users that could actually take advantage of this. I think there's a pretty stark difference in terms of, you know, both the risk tolerance and the needs of, say, institutional custodians versus your individual just holding their personal stash, and the how much cost they can bear in terms of, you know, say MPC, which is going to be much cheaper versus the higher cost of a script-based multisig. How do you guys over at Unchained look at the kind of different needs of both of those classes of user, and maybe where one solution might fit better than another, depending on whether you're talking to an institution or an individual?
Yeah, so I'll start with individuals. So I think I alluded to it earlier that not all individuals even need threshold security necessarily, depending on how much they're trying to protect and how frequently they're trying to access that Bitcoin. So some people are going to be okay with just a single sig wallet, maybe with a passphrase or some other sort of modification like that. Now, an individual that wants to do threshold security, maybe they're protecting a larger amount, they've got these different options to weigh. And multisig is an option that a lot of people hear about. It's actually pretty simple to learn how to do correctly. Unchained does offer collaborative custody with multisig, so we can actually get on a call with clients and help them set it up properly, make sure they know everything they need to know if they're brand new to this stuff. So that's what I do at Unchained. Also, I would say Shamir is an option as well. You know, if someone has a Trezor, it's not going to be too hard to set up. MPC, I don't really think has been very available to someone to try to set up on their own as an individual, just because we're mostly dealing with the ECDSA protocols still until the Schnorr ones are more widely accessible and adopted. And so they're just complicated to set up and use properly. At Unchained, we actually really like multisig because of the immutable contract on the blockchain. That actually is kind of nice because with Shamir and MPC, you don't necessarily have a record of who signs transactions. It can be kept pretty private, to my understanding, whereas when you are using script multisig and a transaction occurs, there's evidence, public evidence of who has signed the transaction. So from a collaborative custody perspective, script multisig has some really nice advantages that just keep things transparent. So that's for individuals. For institutions, I think that single points of failure in a setup would just be considered unacceptable and irresponsible. So that really means that someone needs to use one of these threshold security options in order to protect the Bitcoin. And so that kind of limits the options. Now, again, similar trade-offs between multisig, Shamir, and MPC. One thing that's pretty cool is that you can combine some of these concepts. So you can have a script multisig threshold protection kind of as the foundation on the blockchain. And then let's say you have 3 keys, you can have each of those keys basically protected by its own threshold using either Shamir or MPC. And that allows some people to do something pretty cool where perhaps you delegate keys to different key agents, meaning like an institution that's helping protect a key, a minority of the keys in the structure. And then that key agent can then have their own threshold protection for their key, where different officers in that key agency need to be able to come together to approve any transaction. That's kind of how we're thinking about it at Unchained, is that script multisig is a great foundation because it has that transparency and has some of those advantages. And then in a collaborative custody, anybody who's responsible for holding a key, any institution that's responsible for that, can have their own protection using MPC or Shamir. But yes, of course, if you are using script multisig, there is going to be higher fees, and so it's probably going to be better suited for someone that's holding larger UTXOs, right? Larger amounts of Bitcoin that can afford those fees.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really cool you mentioned the way that you can compose things like that. Those types of structures or architectures are something I've always kind of thought of in my head as almost proto DAOs, like a decentralized autonomous organization. It's something on other chains which have more flexible scripting capabilities, just creating kind of a locking script for funds with more complicated delegated logic as far as restrictions on spending, who can authorize them, and that kind of composed structure between MPC constructs and just plain script constructs. You can kind of emulate that in a way with Bitcoin, where you have, like, say, one organization or group of officers in their own little buckets, and then another over here, and have that kind of transparency on who authorized what, or even potentially, taking it a step further, using pre-signed transactions as part of a setup like that. You could even further restrict what any subgroup like that has access to in the first place by just having the larger set commit to peeling off some funds and then delegating only those funds to a subgroup in that multisig structure. Like, are kind of more advanced things like that something you guys have maybe thought about as far as long-term future things you guys could look into?
Yeah, somewhat. I think for the time being, we're focused on what's available right now, making sure that we do that really well and provide the services that the clients are asking for. But definitely, like, it's exciting to see where this stuff is moving. I imagine just we won't have to wait that many years for more intricate setups to be reliable and easy to set up. I know there's stuff going on like with Miniscript. I don't know a whole lot about that stuff myself, but definitely it looks like the options for approval in terms of moving Bitcoin from one place to another are going to get wider and stronger, and really allow people to customize how they want to be securing their Bitcoin.
I think, hopefully there's a wide open future of possibilities that people can start playing with and plugging different pieces of everything together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we kind of plumbed through most of the topics that we wanted to get through in this today. Is there any kind of final summation or last thoughts to leave listeners with, considering all the different possibilities of how they could set up their own custody solutions?
Yeah. So I think I want to just reiterate a little bit about the combination of using the key-based thresholds and the blockchain-based thresholds, and how that can really remove single points of failure with different institutions trying to hold their Bitcoin. I thought it was pretty interesting when the ETFs launched. I think almost all of them were using are using Coinbase as the custodian in charge of protecting this Bitcoin, and then one of the addresses got revealed as well as to the address holding the Bitcoin for one of these ETFs, and it was plain to see that it was not a multisig address. And so that kind of restricts the options of how the Bitcoin is being secured. It has to be either Shamir or MPC. But I think the door is open for institutions to recognize that they could use multisig as the foundation, and then have rather than just, someone like Coinbase holding one key and splitting up the shares among officers, you could kind of spread out institutional risk by having several different keys held by different institutions, and then, protective measures within each of those institutions as well.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully that's something they recognize sooner rather than later. But Yeah, I'd really like to thank you, Tom, for taking the time to come on and talk with me. And I hope everybody over there at Unchained had a great halving, and let's try to make this epoch a really great one. I think there are a lot of tools on the table this time around to really build some amazing stuff. Let's get to it.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on, Shinobi, and I agree, I'm really bullish on this epoch, not just from a price perspective, but just building and getting Bitcoin available to be used by everyone in a safe way.
All right, well, thanks everybody for listening. Until next time.